So this morning, when you were driving to school on a Monday in mid-April, early in the morning, probably before your caffeine kicked in, you may have asked yourself, why do I have to go to school? And when you did this, what you were actually doing was engaging in one of man's great philosophical debates, whether or not you really realize that. For centuries, we've asked ourselves, what's really the point of education? What's the purpose? What does it mean to be educated? People like Plato and Socrates wrestled with this issue. Currently, leaders from the local to the global level think about education when they set policy for their constituents so that we can have an educated populace. As a teacher, somebody who's decided that I want to dedicate myself to working within the educational system, this is a question that I think about on a daily basis, even early on Monday mornings. So when I needed to come up with a topic to address in my speech, I thought the purpose of education was a natural thing for me to talk about. And what I'd like to talk to you in particular about is how the choices you make in high school connect to your educational path, which doesn't end with the granting of a diploma. We need to be lifelong learners, and you hear your teachers and you hear people who give motivational speeches talk about that all the time, and I want to expand on that a little bit for you. So the very first thing that we need to do is define education. What does it mean when we talk about being educated? So Jean Piaget, who is a scientist who studies human cognitive development, reminds us that the goal of education is not really about accumulating knowledge and facts. Being an educated person doesn't just mean that we can define terms and we can solve math problems and we have an extensive vocabulary. It's not about knowing names and dates. It's about what we can do with that knowledge. How can we create new things and create new ideas in this world? How can we make connections to the world around us? And so he tells us that if we have this great education, if we are dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge, to being the most educated person that we can be, then we are capable of doing new things that can change the world. And this is how we have progress. This is a really important thing to consider because a lot of times we get caught up in the day-to-day process of education. And it's a really hard thing, I know. I have stacks of papers to grade. I have to make lesson plans. And I think about things sometimes in a class-by-class period or a day-to-day schedule. And I know that you do too. We tend to compartmentalize things so that it can be manageable. But what we need to do sometimes is step back and think about the bigger picture. What are we really trying to achieve when we go to school? We have these opportunities in high school. Many of us are going to go to college. We're going to pursue our education in different ways. And we need to make sure that we understand our educational path and we make choices that are going to allow us to experience our world in the fullest, deepest way possible. So John Dewey, who is another leader in the field of education, tells us education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. And I think this is a really important thing for us to remember. We get really wrapped up sometimes in these small day-to-day things that do seem like a big deal because they are. I know you guys are in high school. You are thinking a lot about how the choices you make now are going to influence your future, the grades that you make, the test scores that you have. They are important. They are going to help determine where you go to college, but they are not the only thing that matters. We can't let ourselves think that education is the means to an end, that the resume that we build, the grades that we have, our class rank, our test scores, the list of activities that we put on our resume are what define us, because that's not all we are. We are more than that. We are more than the sum of our parts. We are more than the data on a sheet, and we can't let that be lost in our discussion of education. So when we think about education as not a preparation for life, that it is in fact life. We go back to these concepts that Coach Cherry and that Viraj and that Lucy have talked to us about. We think the choices that we make in high school and college about which classes do we make, which books do we read, what do we study, that's going to help us create this foundation in which we can engage with our world in a different way. The more we know about things, the more meaningful a trip to a museum or travels around the world or listening to a symphony or reading a book, the more meaningful those things are for us. We have more of an understanding of the world around us. We can engage deeper. And the thing that we have to remember is that the small, finite things that we create for ourselves in terms of education are really a foundation. There will come a point in our lives where we've gotten that last diploma, we've taken that last class, and then we have to go out in the world. We have to do something with this knowledge that we've gained. We have to have leadership skills. We have to be creative. We have to be curious. We have to make connections. And we have to be able to take that knowledge that we have and create something new to make the world a better place, to be a leader, to develop those intrinsic qualities in ourselves that separate us from people who don't have that education. If you think about leaders in the world, it's not just that they have facts, that they know things. It's what they do with it. It's their unique perspective about how they can take all that information and generate new ideas. They're creative and they're leaders. You need a firm foundation in education for that. And so the choices that you make in high school are very important. The choices that you make in college are very important, but they're not the end result. They're not the final thing. They're not our ultimate goal. So once we're thinking about our educational path, and we're thinking about where we're ultimately going to be, what kind of person we want to be so we can experience the world around us, there are a couple of other things that we have to consider. And so we probably all know the story of J.K. Rowling, right? We love Harry Potter. The world is a different place because so many adults and children have been able to experience the magic of that story. And we know her personal story, the idea of rags to riches, the struggles that she faced. And she reminds us that failure is not a bad thing, that there's value in a struggle, and that sometimes, if we're afraid to take risks because we're afraid that we're not going to make the highest grade, we're not going to pass that test, we're not going to make a team, we limit ourselves. And when we do that, we deprive ourselves of the opportunity to grow and to develop leadership skills. She tells us that she's seen people who don't want to try new things because they're afraid to fail. And I ask you, what if she was afraid to fail? What if she said, I haven't written anything before. I haven't been published. I don't have the educational background for this. I'm not entirely sure that this is something that I can do. And she never tried, and she never persisted. And all of these people who have experienced the connection of loving this story, the themes that connect people, the connection that happens between parents and children when they experience these movies and books together, they wouldn't be there because she was afraid to fail. And I know this is a hard thing. It was a hard thing for me to say, sure, I'll go ahead and give that speech. Okay, I had to say I would do it despite the fact that I was worried that, it could be a catastrophic failure. But I have to think, how do I grow from this experience? And how can my participation help other people? That's what we have to do when we're thinking about becoming a great leader, when we think about creating our own education. We've got to be bold, and we've got to take risks, and we can't let that fear of failure hold us back. The next thing we have to think about is passion. When we're passionate about something, when the joy of participating in an activity or studying a topic corresponds with our purpose, we think that this study or this engagement is actually creating some change in the world around us, then we found that point in our life when we're passionate about things. High school and college are great places for you guys to both take risks and to develop your passion. Don't be afraid to take that class that seems interesting, but you don't really have that background in. Especially when you go to college, there will be so many opportunities for you. Take that anthropology class, sign up for astronomy. Do those things that are a little bit out of your comfort zone, because that's where growth happens. That's where we develop grit, that's where we develop fortitude, and sometimes we uncover passions that we didn't even know that we had. When you are able to go forth and make choices, setting aside your fear of failure, and when you're ready to embrace the world around you, to step out and to take the risk so that you can develop new interest, that's when you can really figure out what your purpose is. And that's the ultimate result of an education. That's where we're trying to go. We're trying to figure out, how do we change this world? What is our purpose? That's what we've been talking about as humans for as long as we could communicate. It's in books, it's in poems, it's in music. We want to know, what's our purpose? How do we change the world? And education is a great way for us to start determining where we should go with that. Your high school choices are a really strong indicator of where you're going to ultimately end up. And so I can't think of a better, more inspirational person to leave you with tonight than Malala. We know her story. She's been a passionate supporter of education all around the world, particularly for girls and women, to make sure that they have the right to education. And she tells us that one child, one teacher, one book, and one pen really can change the world. She reminds us that the choices that we make are important. We don't have to be J.K. Rowling. We don't have to be a famous person with a lot of power to do something that makes a difference. We can make a difference every day in our life. And education is a way that we can do that. When we extend education to everyone, we maximize people's potential. We allow them to find their passion, to develop their purpose. And so what I want you to take away from this is the idea that you have so many options right now. You have the ability to study so many things, to expose yourself to new ideas. And you do still have many more options that are going to be available to you in the future. It's an exciting time for you. As you continue on your educational path, what we need to do is make sure that we're making choices for the right reasons. We're not always making decisions based on the grade that we're going to make, the score that we're going to earn on the test, and our class rank. We're thinking about, how do we grow as people? How do we develop those skills that are going to make sure that we are able to fulfill our potential for the world around us? How can we contribute to others? How can we lead them and motivate them and inspire them? How can we create things that are new? How can we contribute to our society? As we go on our path, we need to make sure that our choices are made for the right reason. And that reason is so that we can live the best possible life for ourselves and for others. Thank you.